Okay. Due to watching videos and stuff that took a little bit longer than I expected. For the most part, I did get all of them right except one, which was a true false question based off what do central banks do? Price stability, but it's the way they worded it, I guess. But everything else, on to the next level. Again goes the Federal Reserve, GDP charts, and some definitions. Shoot, I'm trying to figure out where to exit. I want to show off the quiz. To the next section. I'm really ready to. All right. I'm confused. What is this? Is this still the section, the first section? I guess I gotta check real quick. Modules. So usually one. Yeah, yes. Okay. So we're gonna do this. Wrap up quiz. Financial literacy. Which should just really be one section, and then schedule for test. It's gonna be nice and simple. So where I was here. Role of governments and economics. Boom. Easy stuff. Easy, nice little run through. I think this will be successful. So I'll literally schedule my test for next week, cancel this prep class, get my certification, and move on. Roles of producers, consumer, and the government, their economics. Producers, the job is to create entrepreneurs, create things. Which project service to produce, how to do it, render the services, how much they cost, wants, unfulfilled wants to consumer. Change, innovate, blah. Consumer, your job is to buy. Get it. You should want everything. Tell the producers what you want. See if they can make it. Um, Constant tug and pull. Government responsibility is to regulate in some form or fashion. Either associate more with the businesses and the producer, or you associate more with the consumer or the people. Which one are you protecting? Are you protecting both? You stay in the middle. That determines the difference between free market capitalism and other forms of government regulation in economy. Um, Responsibility shift according to citizens' demand. Be the protector, like the EPA. They make sure, I've worked for a government agency that's or a private industry that reported directly for the EPA before. We had to make sure the government, the regulations were all being followed because they were the protectors of the state. All right. Providers, education, Affordable Care Act. Yeah. Regulator to make sure that we are not getting screwed. And then tax collector to make sure that these businesses pay on their revenue to further the state in which they live in or preside in, um, gets full beneficiaries from them being there. Mutual relationship. Monetary policy, fiscal policy. These are the policies that are used by the banks to change things. Monetary controls the money supply, changing interest rates, regulating banking, um, stabilize pricing, economic growth, full to employment. Fiscal, the government changes its taxation and spending to usually increase their spending, which increases taxes to kind of get things moving in a different direction. Also reducing unemployment and stabilizing prices. So one is focusing on money supply and interest rates. One is focusing on government spending and taxation. Stability, economic growth, and employment. Those are the byproducts of all. Inflation, debt. What do you want? Nothing? Why are you hungry? It's only 11. Hey, hey, come back here. I can finish this up. I am recording. Okay, I can finish this up. We can play. Just sit right there now. You can sit on your phone right there. No. Let's say it's over. Fiscal policy versus the goals. Goals are different. The methodology is what changes. Debt, inflation. Yeah. Government budget deficits and surpluses, national debt. Budget deficit occurs when, the government spending exceeds tax revenue, which happens all the time. I don't know when we've had a budget surplus. We also have a trade deficit as well. Deficits add to national debt, surpluses reduce it. Large deficits can grow, which have negative consequences, higher interest rate, because they got to get that money back. Banking regulations. Regulations put in place the stability of the financial system. Boom. You have capital requirements. Banks have to have a certain amount of capital to absorb losses, remain solvent. Got it. Liquidity requirements. Got to have that cash on hand. It can't be in some tied up contract, blah, 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 Wall Street, ROI, mumbo jumbo. It's got to be cash, liquid, ready to go, gold. Guaranteed deposits up to a certain amount. Deposit insurance, biggest scam for the scammers. Consumer law protection. Make sure people don't abuse these banking regulations. And then taxation, crucial aspect of economics. It's what we need for the government to implement things. They gotta tax us. The government revenue for public goods and services, collection of money. They got the income taxes. You got taxes on employment taxes. You have sales tax, property tax, tax. There's bunches of tax. And they're supposed to turn around and then give us services that beyond roads and whatever else. But sometimes that stuff is privatized and it just becomes a big confusing hoopla. Anyways, study taxation includes impact of economic behavior, the different taxation systems, principles, taxation, efficiency, simplicity, transparency. Taxation studies. Progressive taxation. Increase in taxes as the income of the taxpayer increases. As we get more money, more taxing, which we don't. We have a progressive range, but it stops at a percentage. 37%, I think, is the max still. Or does it get up to 40? I don't know. 42. Regressive tax decreases because broke times broke can't really tax people, but yeah. Flat tax, everyone pays the same tax. That's like sales tax. Everyone pays. Doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. Sales tax is flat. Like I said, for the most part, we're on a progressive taxation to a certain range. Progressive taxation, I guess, occurs and stuff like things like maybe like reduced lunch or something like that. Income goes down, still to pay, but it's not the same amount. Value added taxation, each level of production you got to tax. So as the iPhone, I guess, goes through different areas, it gets taxed a little bit more until that whole thing, then that sales tax, baby. And then excise. So flat specific tax to things like alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, gasoline. Me seen as a way to discourage consumption of these goods because they're kind of luxury, I guess, in a way you need money to ruin your life. But sure, gasoline is just for cars. It is a luxury in itself, but it's like you usually use it for employment 9 to 8 times out of 10. These are some government correction policies. So we got regulation, setting rules, standards, minimum wages, price ceilings, price floors, whatever. Right? Fair competition, bureaucracy. So it's supposed to protect consumers and stuff. Fair competition, but it increases that red tape, making things just more difficult 9 times out of 10. Higher costs for businesses. Yeah. Messes up innovation. Yeah. Taxation. That's what the job, you know what I mean? Pull up the taxes. Got to get that money up. It funds the goods and services, public lives. But, yeah, economic distortions, tax evasion. People be like, okay, I don't got it. Or delays black markets. Because, like, yeah, I'm not going to operate in the areas. I'm going to buy things where sales tax don't affect all these things. This one, they talk about the tax on cigarettes and alcohol, and then people just start bootlegging or selling loosies. Tax evasion. So subsidies, these are things that are provided to usually to businesses, so they can essentially operate without going in the red. Financial assistance supports industries or activities, economic growth, essential sectors, agriculture, renewable. Give the farmers subsidies so they can plant and keep that economy going without them, like I said, not being able to bring home anything for their families. That's something we talked about a lot in the economics or the agricultural economic studies at Georgia. Subsidies given to farmers, provided to farmers. But it can lead to this inefficient allocation where you give some farms a bunch of allocations where other farms need more, and then that leads to imbalances in the industry or dependency. They can't do anything, without it, and the corruption, because then you'll have people who falsify information for subsidies or what happened with the PPP loans, things like that. Agricultural subsidies stabilize food prices, overproduction, higher food prices, blah blah blah. Price controls. So price controls is more of a regulation. Like I said, it's regulation, but it's its own. So minimum, maximum prices, price floor ceilings, um, price gouging, protects them from low prices. So price floors. Floors looking like ceilings, blah blah blah. So it tries to prevent these things, but ends up creating shortages, ends up creating surpluses, and then in the middle, I remember the thing, that little middle area is where the black market is, where it's like people are going to operate in that area to try to get to that middle point in the market, reduce quality, cheap stuff, cheap employment, making housing affordable, housing shortages, landlords reducing maintenance. They're like, oh, if I gotta operate this, then they get no silver finishes. It happens. It's not good. And then public goods and services, the government provides these when areas, what I mean? It's like if they provided like phone repair because Apple wasn't doing it, they didn't do it, but they stick to stuff like national defense, education, healthcare, which go up and down all the time, always compared to other countries. We're just in a space that I'm not going to talk about right now in this capacity, but yep, justice market failures and inefficient allocation of resources, which leads to overfunding, military healthcare or not funding military, all compared to education. It's depending on the various factors, market failure, design, policy, information. Yep, yep. Standard of living, SOL, material of the well-being of the people, material goods and services. What it look like? What we got? Do we got that name brand? Or are we all rocking less than great value? Less than. Um, Purchasing power, key components, basic necessities. Yes. Do we have sanitation, water? This is where it's up in the air for everybody, right? So it's measured GDP, of course, which we went over before. It's also measured by this newer thing that I'm seeing, which is the HDI, which I'm like, I don't remember that being a thing, but I appreciate it. Life expectancy, education levels, because it is important. It's like GDP can be all the way up to the top, but if the people are suffering within the economy, it kind of is like, who cares, right? Um, I'm trying to think, but the I guess areas it says. I'm thinking about like Japan. It's like it doesn't have life expectancy. Yes, but I think life expectancy doesn't have average of like birth rates and death rates. I want to say in it. Um, Poverty rates, access to healthcare, education, housing affordability. You got to invest in human capital. You got to invest in the education and training of the people of your economy, or the economy will fail. I think about, let's say, yes, use Japan again, or other Asian centric areas where the education is really important. So it leads to just higher standards in employment. And we need to increase our funding or focus in education to do the same. More innovation technology, more, higher paid teachers. Um, and it's a more uh, emphasis on the importance of education, which hopefully would then lead to more scholarships or more free institutions or more subsidized institutions, or it will hopefully lead to more money in the direction of education. Right there, educated populations, they would create better technology and provide better services, therefore increasing GDP. Says it right there. It doesn't work if everyone's dumb. For dumbing down the economy or dumbing down the population, it's making us all TikTokers. They can't help out. They just can't. Investing in capital goods. We gotta have the Apples and the Samsungs and other people out there. The Apples and the Microsofts and the whoever else. They got the equipment, they got the factories, they employ the people. Keep the economy cycle thing going. Production possibility cover, I remember this one. It increases as technology goes up. So quality of motion pictures. Oh, but there is, I guess, the trade off. It shows the opportunity cost, I guess, and trade offs. So these are different areas. So movies produced versus video games produced. Trade offs. Produce more of the same. Usually, I mean, in this area, I'd probably want to be at B or meet in the middle because movies and video games. At one point, we were probably more on this area, but with Marvel and everything failing, or even Marvel taking mostly from their comic book IPs and video game stuff, we're definitely more in this side right now today. Focusing on producing goods with competitive advantages, voluntary, non-fraudulent allows nations to obtain goods and services they can produce. Increases production probabilities. This is like specialization. I'm like, this is referring to specialization. Yes. So you can focus on the areas that you can't really operate in Therefore, make sure that the people you're trading with do the same, and y'all just make the best products and trade away. International trade is a great trade of this, and internationals do certain things that they can do, and we go from there. GDP higher per capita, like Norway or Switzerland, have a higher standard of living. With low GDP and capital like sub-Saharan Africa, that's the only examples they got. Standard of living, increase the past centuries technology advancements, of course. Education, indoor plumbing, electricity, water access. Inner living, the life, broader subfactors like happiness, social connections. Yeah, they don't go over quality of life too. Ooh, these are the things I actually do remember. Okay, economic factors that affect trade. This is when you do they trade. This is what we, should be talking about tariffs and stuff in this eventually, right? Yes, there it goes. Trade policies and tariffs. All right, so I remember this stuff for the most part, but it is kind of phasey, huzzy, luzzy for me, but not too much. All right, absolute advantage. Boom. International trade. These are some factors, key concepts that best approach of business and trade. Absolute advantage is a country that can produce more of a product because it's resources. Essentially, where they're at, like you can't like a perfect false example would be Wakanda, right? They have absolute advantage when it came to vibranium. It's literally right beneath their country, and they have sanctions to all of it for the most part. So that's what they had the competitive advantage in. Comparative advantage is like us, Apple, and Samsung, right? So it would be U.S., Apple, Korea, Samsung, right? Comparative advantage, they can do the same thing, same levels, same cost for the most part. Trade barriers, come back here. Policies aimed international markets, taxes, so the trade barriers to make sure that we're not importing or exporting like things like the quotas. Oh, that's technically a trade barrier. It was right there. Um, you got tariffs, which are taxes placed on sale of imports to increase prices of imports to make it less competitive than domestic products, which we implemented to combat the Timus and all the other things that are produced internationally, imported, and it's not that they're inferior or not compared to our products. It's more just price wise, they have the competitive advantage. They're really really cheap, and if you make them on the same level as it's it's to help domestic products, and we need it, I guess. And then quotas, just make sure that we ain't putting too many Toyotas and Hondas on the streets because we want people to buy Fords. You trying to learn a lesson? A lesson, Brana. Absolute advantage. Do you remember? Oh, yeah, I don't remember this stuff. Oh, absolute advantage. All right. Saudi Arabia has the most absolute advantage in oil due to its vast natural oil reserves. So therefore, they get to essentially market and determine everything that has to do with oil for the most part. Which is, my example I use was Wakanda. Wakanda has an absolute advantage over vibranium because it's literally where the country is at. So it's kind of the same thing with Saudi Arabia. Comparative advantage. Although China have an absolute advantage in all industries, it has a comparative advantage in labor-intensive manufacturing because of its low-cost workforce. However, U.S. has comparative advantage in high-tech products. I mean, yes, because we have Apple and Microsoft here, but like Samsung and or Google, I guess Google. So I guess the majority of the tech. That's all we got is big tech. You know what I mean? Maybe that's why we're jumping into it so much because it's our biggest area right now. Because it used to be cars, not cars anymore. It used to be like phones and stuff. It's not that anymore per se, but it's other big tech. Big tech does, I guess, technically still reign the U.S. Even though Japan used to be big tech too, but not so much anymore. Opportunity costs. Country can either produce computers or clothes. You gonna make more clothes and more computers. All right, get this. Competition. The global smartphone industry is highly competitive. See, look at that. Use my example that I use. Major players: U.S. Apple, Samsung, Korea, and Hawaii, which is China, are the big ones. The big three, and they compete all the time. It's wonderful. All their phones do the same thing. Resource availability. Australia, with its abundant mineral resources, has one of the largest amounts of coal and iron. Countries that lack these resources, like Japan, must import these. So yeah, Japan doesn't have the most natural resources. They have a lot of specialization in rice and tea and something else. I forget. I can't remember these things right off the bat. But as far as natural resources, because the country's so small, they do, and because there's decades of being isolated, um, they have to import a lot of natural resources. I guess from Australia, which is cool. And then we have this one right here: trade policies and tariffs. So trade policies and tariffs are set by the government, can either promote or hinder international trade. Which, in our case, in the economy of the U.S., we are hindering international trade to boost domestic innovation in some areas that we don't want to because we like Tumu. We like Timu. We all like Timu. We like our Chinese and Japanese cheap stuff. Okay, but tariffs are in place to promote the free flow of goods of in a more protectionist fashion. Um, we imposed recent tariffs and restrictions because we wanted to protect domestic industry, apparently. So as we know, lower tariffs make imported goods cheaper, which, more Timu. Higher tariffs make it worse, which means less Timu. The example they gave, though, was European Union allows free trade market with no tariffs. Oh, see? EU allows free trade between member countries with no tariff, leading to increased trade within the region. Yeah. EU be on doing a bunch of stuff. They made Apple change the USB port. International trade agreements. So we got the NAFTA. Do you remember the NAFTA history? That's hilarious. That's crazy. North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada and Mexico that we were about to mess up literally. I want to say this year. It was signed in 1993. Essentially, like I said, it removed the barriers of trade between us and Canada, so we don't have to, tax. But I'm like, I want to say as of recently, no, we kind of messed with that a while ago, didn't we? I want to say that was affected. That was NAFTA, which, like I said, was established in 1993, was literally about. I want to say it was one of the things that did or was about to be affected by the tariff that went into effect of 2025. I actually can't wait to see how they write about this. I guess I might be a teacher teaching this stuff. How it affected el economy. And then we got the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which, yeah, they handle trade between 151 Pokemon nations. The original 151. All right, exchange rates. This is where we are right now. I think the exchange rate right now for the dollar is weak. We are not in a really, really good point right now. So weak demand on dollar means less demand for products from a country. I don't think, like I said, people. I mean, they buying iPhones, I guess, but I don't know. Weak American dollar exports cheaper, competitive internationally. Weak dollar means also that traveling in foreign countries is more expensive, which is what we're kind of experiencing right now. Versus a strong exchange, when the dollar is strong, that means less competitive, from international markets. The example that Chinese citizens buying American products increase demand from. I get that, but like I don't think that's what's happening. But I do know they want iPhones over there, but there's always some regulation that prevents iPhones in China. Um, the way they're supposed, I guess, to be sold or how they're demanded. Currency appreciation, it appreciates. These are some weird. These are just a bunch of things that happen. Cool. That should be the last part, right? Second test. Globalization. I actually remember this for the most part. Economic globalization, multifaceted, boost markets, multinational corporations, tax avoidance and optimization. National corporations concentrate wealth in their home countries. So the Apples, Googles, Amazons, pharmaceutical giants that operate all around the world, home base U.S. Tax avoidance optimization, maximize their tax liability. Oh, because they're making like they're putting their buildings in China or they're putting their buildings in Vietnam or whatever. They're avoiding taxation and optimizing. Okay, cool. That's funny. Got it. Research and development, R&D concentrated in developing nations, leading to technological advances and intellectual property. So if you're doing like research and marketing in other countries like Japan, taking their technology, bring it home. Corporate headquarters and decision making. Right. Developed nations were strategic. I guess if companies want to incorporate in like China or like I said Vietnam, like I think Nintendo did or does. Profit re word recuperate. Profits earned. So taking that money they earn over there by employing and doing things and then sending it back home and lobbying political influence, I guess, in those governments to make sure they get these factories and stuff going. That is a lot to remember. Not really, but like I don't get what we're supposed to do with this information. It's information, but what we're supposed to do with it as far as being a teacher and or testing on it. I would actually like to know. Jobless placement, wage stagnation, skill mismatching, working condition, cultural classes. These are things that okay, no, I okay. So yes, if you come in to another country and yes, manufacturing jobs move the country with low labor costs, which leads to unemployment. So essentially, yeah, I moved my manufacturing over to Vietnam, and I no longer need my U.S. workers. That is now displacing jobs from U.S. workers or wherever else, or even people in Vietnam who had a good job somewhere else, and now everyone wants to go work at the factory. Wage stagnation, suppressed wages, which makes inequality and unfairness. Skill mismatches, like yeah, if everyone, a lot of a lot of outsourcing has been happening in customer service, as you know, Marie. It's been outsourced to other areas because the skill levels have increased as far as phone customer service and places like I think like places like South America, Costa Rica, where maybe the language barrier might have been an issue before, but it's not anymore. So they got the skill, they get the job, and people have been outsourcing, therefore less domestic customer servants representatives. Working condition, encourage classes. I think there's a race to the bottom, exploit global chain issues or supply chain issues, and then cultural classes. If there's just a cultural clash of people working in said environments. And then there's pollution, climate change, resource distribution. You have an area that was like really, really, really unpopular. Now is really popular. It can skew things. And then resource consumption. If there was a forest or something nearby, and now they're cutting down all the trees and using them for whatever versus what they was used for before. At an increasing rate, it could be a problem. Oh, this is hilarious. Georgia's role in the international economy. What do we do? This is actually something I would have to learn something new. So Georgia's economic landscape is woven in the global marketplace. We are a critical player. Now, I will say, Brie, I don't know if you know this, but they did establish like Savannah, which is a big port town, right? Before they even get to it, because I already know where our big contribution is Georgia is. Even when they established Savannah, I don't know if you remember this from Georgia history. They put Savannah as such an important town, like in the establishment of the 13 colonies, as you know, because of its port, its ability. I don't know if it was just better than the Carolinas or the Virginias, but it was always known as Savannah's port has been like I said, I remember how much they emphasize it in the Georgia study history, but it's always been a big deal. And sure enough, as I scanned this information, guess what they're mentioning? Savannah's port. Huh? What? What, the one that was burned down twice? Or burned down once? Oh, okay, sure. Anyways, um, Georgia plays a significant role in growing the international economy. These are critical getaways for international trade. The port of Savannah, one of the fastest growing and busiest ports, container ports in the U.S., facilitates movements between goods in the U.S. and the global markets, particularly Asia and Europe. Stuff from our PlayStations from, you know what I mean, from Japan and stuff come into Savannah, yo. It's crazy. The Port of Brunswick, which I don't know where that is, specializes on roll-on, roll-off cargo handling vehicles and heavy machinery. So I guess in like tanks and big trucks and boat pieces for these cruise ships. See, look at that. We got another port, the Appalachian Regional Port, which I think that's in Carolina. Oh, never mind. A port that extends the reach of the Savannah port deeper into the surrounding areas. I want to say it might be in the Carolinas, I think. It allows for Northwest Georgia and neighboring states to access the global markets more efficiently. After that is the Blue Right Connector Port, which is right next to the Appalachian Regional Port, which extends the Savannah Port further into the state northeast. Which I'm like, they're saying this. Like, y'all talking about these are clearly ports in Carolina as well. It reduces transportation costs and highway congestion. It also allows easier global markets through rail transportation. Sure. Oh, here's another part of Atlanta. I guess I don't know how we didn't know this, of course. Another way we contribute to international trade is our huge international airport. Of that's wrong. What? Hartsfield Jackson. Really, really big deal. Because it is one of the bigger. Is it the biggest international airport in the U.S.? Or it's the most busy? I don't think it's the biggest, but it's definitely it's the most busy. Um, yeah. I guess the other home organizations in Atlanta that are global entities is also Coca Cola. So we contribute to the global economy here in Georgia, Atlanta. You know what I mean? Something like that. A little light work. Well, Atlanta, Savannah, and yeah, Georgia in general. On top of being responsible for, at one point, we were agricultural leaders. But I don't want to go back too far. But yeah, it was always important for the economy. And I'll give my spiel, I guess, when I teach the Georgia economy. I guess I like this little part. Uh, impact the trade on Georgia economy. Of course, they bring up that cotton. I didn't want to go there, but they brought it up. Cotton, peanuts, soybeans, poultry, beef, cattle. We also are lit in our clay, limestone, other things. We got timber because we got mad trees and forestry for paper and fuel. Natural gas, which shout out to someone over there. We got some natural gas wells all throughout the state, translated throughout these pipelines. You know what I mean, for heating, cooking, and electricity. Someone I know personally knows all about that. And then, of course, Georgia's economy is also ran by the three major rivers, which we do have that generate lots of hydroelectric. You should also know about this as well, person. The Chattahoochee, the Flint, and the Savannah rivers, which we use for drinking, also used for plant irrigation and hydroelectricity. So the Georgia economy, I guess to sum up, is actually pretty lit. We're a major logistics hub due to our transportation infrastructure. See, they just lied right here on in educational documents. Sure, between 85, 75, and 20. Yeah, we have a wonderful transportation infrastructure. Word, you know what I mean, Bree? 400. I'm just gonna name all the ones that are literally always constantly either being worked on or have a hour-long traffic situation. But sure, I guess if I have said this to my wife because we drove in LA once or twice, it is better than LA. LA is the worst. I couldn't. Spoke to someone else who also lived in LA too, and it's like, no, Atlanta stuff be traffic for no reason mostly. But hey, we got that, and like I said before, we got Hartsfield Jackson, critical global gateway, international trade. Its status as the world's busiest airport. Cargo movement, passengers connecting Georgia to the whole world. Straight flights to Japan. Straight flights to Africa. Straight flights to Australia. 22, 15, 15. I know these numbers off the top. Straight flights to Paris. 9 hours. So no, Atlanta's lit. We are, yeah. So key takeaway, Georgia's strategic location and its investment in infrastructure, welcome business environment, makes it a key player in the international economy. AKA, why are we not successful when we live in Georgia? Good question. Something we got to figure out. I wanted to leave, but now looking at all this stuff, I'm like, there's no reason not to. We have music or movie. We have music, actually, music industry. As far as entertainment, we had movies at one point, even though movies are moving away from Atlanta for the most part. But yeah, we lit out here. All right, end of the video. I'm gonna take my test, and then I'm gonna do financial literacy in one spike, and then I'll be done with L series, yo. We're gonna take this test, schedule it, pass it.